My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34 years old, a full-time trauma nurse, and the single mother of a 6-year-old boy named Ethan, the only child, my heartbeat, my entire world. And just 3 months ago, I watched him nearly die in my arms. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I just finished a double shift at the hospital and was walking to my car when my phone rang. It was Ethan's daycare. I remember the director's voice. It was trembling. "Rachel, Ethan collapsed. We've called an ambulance. You need to come right away." The world tilted. I don't remember the drive, only that I got there before the ambulance did. I saw the flashing lights before I saw him. Ethan was limp, pale, and burning with fever. His little chest heaved like it was fighting for every blanks. I'm a nurse. I've seen children in septic shock before. I've worked on code blues. I've held hands as machines beeped their final note. But nothing prepared. They rushed him to the ER, then straight to the ICU. Within minutes, he was surrounded by doctors, tubes, wires. I remember a nurse gently guiding me out of the room because I couldn't stop shaking. My knees gave out. I sat on the cold tile floor just outside the door, arms wrapped around myself, trying to breathe. Trying not. And that's when my phone buzzed. A guy. It was a text from my mother. "Don't forget Grandma's 80th birthday dinner tonight. The whole family's counting on you. Cupcakes." I stared at the screen in disbelief. At that moment, my son was unconscious in an ICU bed, and my mother was worried about cupcakes. I didn't. 10 minutes later, she sent another message. "Rachel, this is really important to your grandmother. Everyone's already asking if you're coming. Can't you just drop him off with the nurses for a few hours?" My hands trembled. Not from exhaustion, not even from fear, though God knows I was terrified. But from something else. Rage. A deep, hollow ache that had been building inside me for years but had finally reached its breaking point. Drop him off? I'm not just a nurse. I'm his nurse. I'm his mother. I knew what was happening inside that room. Septic shock, organ risk. The possibility, no, the reality that I might lose the one person I loved more than anything in this world. And my mother wanted me to leave him for a birthday party? That moment changed everything. It ripped off the mask I'd worn my whole life, the obedient daughter, the quiet middle child, the one who never complained. That text, so casual and cruel, peeled back all the years of subtle rejection, favoritism, and guilt my mother had buried me under. I know this might sound shocking, maybe even unbelievable, but every word is true. This story isn't just about a party. It's about what happens when you realize the people who are supposed to protect you, nurture you, stand by you, only love the version of you that makes their lives easier. My son nearly died. And my family, my own mother, acted like it was a minor inconvenience to her dinner plans. But to truly understand how we got there, how a text about cupcakes shattered an entire family, I have to take you back. Back before the hospital. Before Ethan. Before the lies and silences piled high enough to drown me. Because families don't fall apart in a day. They rot slowly, from the inside out. And I was about to discover just how rotten mine really was. It started with a phone call I should have ignored. 2 weeks before Ethan landed in the ICU, I got a call from my mother on a Thursday evening. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, and was settling on the couch while Ethan played with his building blocks on the floor. My back ached from a long shift in the trauma unit, and all I wanted was 20 minutes of silence before dinner. But the screen lit up with Mom and I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. I should have pressed it, but I didn't. "Hi, Mom." "Rachel," she said, already annoyed. "No, hello, no. How are you? We need to talk about Grandma's birthday party. I've already spoken with Daniel and Bethany. Everyone's on board except you." I closed my eyes. "Okay, when is it?" "Next Saturday. Dinner at Jefferson's at 6. We've rented out the back room. You'll bring the cupcakes." "Next Saturday? I'm working that weekend. Night shift." "Well, switch it. You've got 2 weeks. It's her 80th, Rachel. I can't just swap trauma shifts last minute." She cut me off. You always have an excuse. I'm not making an excuse, I said, keeping my voice low so Ethan wouldn't sense my tension. I'm telling you I might not be able to get off. You're not a surgeon, Rachel. You're not that important. If you wanted to be there, you'd find a way. Her words hit me like a slap. I stood up and walked into the kitchen so Ethan wouldn't hear. Don't say that to me, I'm doing my best. You always act like you're the only one with a hard life, she snapped. Bethany's got twins and a full-time job, and she's still making time. Bethany works from home and has a nanny. You chose your path, Rachel. No one told you to have a baby on your own. That stopped me cold. I didn't choose to raise Ethan alone, I said, my voice tightening. His father died, you remember that, don't you? She exhaled loudly, the way she always did when she thought I was being dramatic. Don't guilt me, Rachel. I just want you to be part of the family for once. Your grandmother is turning 80. She won't be around forever. I swallowed hard. My chest burned with everything I wanted to say and everything I couldn't. I'll see what I can do. You'll be there. I'm counting on you, she said, and hung up. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my phone. She hadn't asked how Ethan was doing. She hadn't asked how I was managing with rent, daycare, overnight shifts, exhaustion. She hadn't asked about me at all. The next day, Bethany called. Her voice was all honey, but I knew the routine. Hey Rack, so, Mom said you're being weird about Grandma's birthday? I closed my eyes. I'm not being weird. I just might be working. Oh, come on. She laughed. It's one dinner. I'm bringing the kids. I even bought matching outfits for them. It's going to be adorable. I forced a smile into my voice. I'm glad. I just don't know if I can get off that night. Well, you have to come, she said. Mom's already planning the seating chart, and she said Grandma's expecting a speech from you. A speech? I blinked. Yeah, you know, middle granddaughter, nurse, single mom, all that. It'll be touching. I wanted to scream. I felt like I was being roped into a play I hadn't auditioned for, let alone agreed to. Over the next few days, the pressure mounted. Daniel emailed me with the subject line, "Please just show up," writing, "Rachel, for once, don't make things harder than they need to be. It's a dinner. Smile, eat cake, leave. That's all anyone's asking. Mom is already stressed. Don't be the reason she has a meltdown." R9. Every text, every call, every subtle jab made it clear. It didn't matter what I was dealing with. I was supposed to fall in line. Show up, smile. Make things easier for everyone else. I felt like I was slipping back into the role I had spent years trying to outgrow, the overlooked daughter, the afterthought, the one who only existed when someone needed something. And then Ethan got sick. It started with a mild fever on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, he was throwing up and complaining that his stomach hurt. I took the day off and kept him home, assuming it was a stomach bug. By the afternoon, his fever had spiked to 103, and he couldn't keep water down. By evening, he was lethargic and glassy-eyed, his breathing shallow. That night, I drove him to the ER, heart pounding. They took him back immediately. Blood work. IV fluids. Oxygen. His blood pressure dropped, his skin turned cold. I watched the doctors work on him, watched the numbers on the monitor dip and climb, watched them admit him to the ICU, all while praying, "Please don't take him, please don't take him from me." And then, as I sat at his bedside, holding his tiny hand, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Still haven't heard from you. Are you bringing vanilla or chocolate?" I stared at the message for a long time. And then, for the first time in my life, I didn't reply. That silence, it turned out, was louder than anything I could have said. I stayed with Ethan through the night. The ICU was dim and hushed, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the hiss of oxygen and the steady beep of machines keeping my son alive. Nurses moved softly around us, nodding at me with sympathy in their eyes, but no one disturbed me. I sat by his bed with his tiny fingers wrapped around mine and prayed. The next morning, I texted my mother. Ethan is in critical condition. He's in the ICU. Please stop asking about the party. I didn't expect a warm response, but what I got still hurt more than I could admit. It took her 6 hours to reply. I'm sorry to hear that, but everything is already planned. People are flying in, just try to make an appearance if you can. An appearance. My child was fighting for his life, and she wanted me to make an appearance like I was some actress walking into a scene with makeup and fake smiles while my soul was cracking open. I didn't respond. I didn't answer when Bethany texted later that night. Don't take this personally, but Mom said she's really disappointed. This party means a lot to her. You always make things about you. About me? I wanted to scream. I wanted to pick up the phone and tell her what it was like to hold your child's limp hand, and wonder if you'll ever hear him laugh again. I wanted to ask her if she thought that was about me too. But I didn't. I kept it in. Like I always had. That's the thing about being the middle child in a family like mine. You learn early how to disappear. How to smile when you feel hollow. How to nod and agree when you want to scream. How to let others take up space while you shrink yourself small enough to fit between the cracks. I remember one time, when I was 12, I came home crying because a boy at school had called me ugly. My mom was on the phone with Bethany's ballet instructor and waved me off like I was a mosquito. Can this wait? She hissed, without even looking up. It always waited. My pain always came second if it came at all. Daniel was the star athlete. Bethany was the beauty queen. And me? I was the one who kept the peace. Who got good grades and never got caught sneaking out. Who learned how to listen without being heard. The invisible daughter. And now, sitting in a hospital room while my son fought for his life, I realized nothing had changed. No one from the family came to see us. Not one call. Not one visit. Not even a voicemail. They had their party. I saw it all on social media 2 days later. Pictures of the restaurant, Grandma beaming in a golden sash, the cake, the cousins, the decorations. Bethany had even put Ethan's name on a little card that read, "Missing our little buddy today." As if a hashtag and a party favor could substitute for empathy. I stared at that photo for a long time. I don't know what I felt, mortgage or betrayal. Probably both. Ethan spent 5 days in the ICU before he stabilized. 5 days of fear, tears, whispered prayers, and sleeping upright in a chair because I refused to leave his side. 5 days where I didn't hear a single word from the people who were supposed to love us most. On the 6th day, when Ethan finally opened his eyes and whispered, "Mommy," I broke. I held him close, my face buried in his hair, and sobbed silently so he wouldn't see. He was weak, but he was alive. That should have been a moment of joy. But all I felt was grief for the family I didn't have. A week after we were discharged, I got a voicemail from my mother. "Rachel, I don't know what's going on with you, but ignoring your family is not acceptable. You've always been so dramatic. If you're angry, be a grown-up and say so. We missed you at the party." Grandma was disappointed. And Bethany said Ethan's illness was just a virus. "I hope you're not exaggerating things for sympathy. Call me back." I deleted it. No one who loves you accuses you of seeking sympathy when you're nursing your child back from the edge of death. No one who sees you doubts your pain just because it inconveniences their plans. That night, I sat on the floor of Ethan's bedroom after putting him to sleep. I looked around at the nightlight stars on his ceiling, the storybooks lined neatly on the shelf, the drawings taped to the wall. And I cried not because I was overwhelmed or tired or scared, but because I finally understood something that had haunted me for years. I was never truly part of that family. Not the way I needed to be. They loved the idea of me, the nurse, the responsible one, the fallback plan. But when I needed them, when I was gasping for air and begging for help, they weren't there. They never had been. After we came home from the hospital, I expected, perhaps foolishly, that someone from the family would check in. A card. A call. Something. But the silence was deafening. A week passed. Then, another. Nothing. Ethan was still recovering. He tired easily and had trouble eating, but he was getting better, little by little. I was exhausted, but I kept going. That's what mothers do. That's what I do. And then, like a slap in the face, Bethany tagged me in a Facebook post. Such a beautiful evening celebrating Grandma's 80th with the whole family. Some people sadly couldn't make it, but we still had the love. There I was, some people. Not Rachel, not my sister. Not Ethan's mom, who was in the ICU. Just an afterthought. A shaded jab wrapped in sugary words. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I stared at the photo of her and Daniel posing on either side of Grandma, arms around her, and I realized something that made my stomach twist. They looked like a family. A complete family. One that didn't include me. 2 days later, I called my mother not because I wanted to, but because Ethan had asked when he could see Grandma again. He still loved her. He still remembered her stories and the candies she used to keep in her purse for him. My mother answered after 3 rings. "Oh, you're calling." That was her greeting. I took a deep breath. "Ethan's asking about you. He wants to visit." A pause. "Well, now's not really a good time. I've been watching Bethany's twins while she's back at work. It's a lot." "I understand," I said. "But maybe just for an hour. He misses you." She sighed. "I just don't think I can take on more right now, Rachel. I already have enough on my plate." And that was that. That's when I saw it clearly. My child wasn't a priority. Neither was I. We weren't even considered part of the core anymore. But the real blow came a week later when I got a call from Daniel. We hadn't spoken directly in months. "Hey," he said. "Just a heads up, Mom's rewriting her will. She's naming Bethany as executor. I thought you should know." I was stunned. "Wait, what? Why?" "Why?" "I don't know," he said casually. "She said Bethany's more consistent, more involved with the family." I wanted to laugh. Or scream. I wasn't involved because I was working 2 jobs, raising a child by myself, and had no one to lean on. Because I was nursing my son back to health while they were passing around wine and taking family photos. I stayed quiet. "She's also updating the trust for the lake house," he added. "It'll go to Bethany and me jointly. She said it's cleaner that way." My heart dropped. That house was where we spent every summer growing up. My dad built the dock with his bare hands. He taught me to swim in that lake. That house was the last piece of him I had. "But that was Dad's," I said quietly. "He wanted it for all of us." "Yeah, well, Mom says you're not exactly in a position to maintain a second property right now. She said it's for the best." I felt sick, like the ground had shifted beneath me and I was being quietly erased from my own history. No family meeting. No conversation. Just a decision made over dinner or coffee, without me, as if my name had already been scratched out long ago. I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. They were dividing the family, and I wasn't even given a seat at the table. A few days later, Bethany posted more pictures, this time of a girls' weekend at the lake house. Her, my mom, her twins, even Grandma, wrapped in a shawl and smiling on the deck. There were no pictures of my dad. And definitely none of me. That was when I realized something deeper than pain. I realized I had been quietly moved out of the frame. Cropped from the family portrait in slow, subtle ways, first emotionally, then legally, and soon, permanently. No one ever said, "You don't belong." They didn't have to. They showed me. I didn't want anything from them. Not money. Not property. Not favors. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was acknowledgement. To be seen, to be counted, not pitied, not blamed. Just seen for who I really was. A daughter who tried, a sister who gave more than she took, a mother doing the best she could in the dark. So, I decided to reach out. Not because I thought it would fix things, but because I needed to try, for Ethan's sake, and maybe for my own. I started with Grandma. I brought Ethan over one Sunday afternoon, unannounced but bearing her favorite sugar-free cookies and a bouquet of those pale yellow roses she used to keep in her garden. I figured she'd be happy. She always said Ethan reminded her of Grandpa. But when she opened the door, her expression faltered. "Oh," she said. "I thought you were Bethany." I laughed gently, brushing it off. "Nope, just me and Ethan. We brought you something." Her smile returned, but it was polite, rehearsed. Not the warm, open grin I remembered from childhood. We sat with her in the living room. Ethan told her about his new robot toy and showed her the scar on his arm from the ivy. She nodded along but seemed distracted, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Eventually, she said, "Well, I've got my bridge group coming soon. You'll have to visit again another time, dear." I helped Ethan gather his things. Before we left, I gave her a photo one of me and Ethan taken the week after he was discharged. I had it printed specially, framed it. On the back I'd written, "We love you. Rachel and Ethan." When I handed it to her, she hesitated. Then she smiled again, tight-lipped. "Thank you, sweetie. I'll find a place for it." But when I visited again a few weeks later, the frame was nowhere to be found. Still, I kept trying. I called Daniel and invited him to dinner at my place. Just him. No kids, no mom, no Bethany. I wanted to talk, not argue. I wanted to hear his side, to understand why he hadn't visited, why he hadn't said anything when they rewrote the will, why he hadn't called when Ethan nearly died. He actually came. He brought a bottle of wine and awkward silence. I made roast chicken, his favorite. Ethan was thrilled to have an uncle visit. He asked Daniel a dozen questions during dinner about sports, his job, his dog, and Daniel played along. But when Ethan went to bed and the house quieted, the truth began to surface. "I didn't know it was that serious," Daniel said, avoiding my eyes. "Mom told us it was just a virus. She said you were exaggerating again." Exaggerating. That word sliced me. I sat there stunned. "She showed you the hospital forms, right?" I asked quietly. "You know he was in the ICU for 5 days." Daniel shifted. "Yeah, but I don't know, Rach. You've always kind of had a way of making things bigger than they are." I stared at him. "He almost died, Daniel." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not saying it wasn't serious, just, you always take things so personally, like everything's a slight." "Because it is," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Do you think it's normal that I wasn't consulted about Dad's lake house? That they cut me out of the trust without a conversation? Do you think it's okay that Mom told me to leave Ethan in the ICU and come to a party?" Daniel sighed. "Look, I'm not defending everything. But you've distanced yourself too. You stopped showing up." "I stopped showing up because every time I do, I'm reminded I don't belong." That ended the conversation. He left early. Said he had to get back to his wife. Didn't hug me goodbye. The next week, I received a group email from my mother. "Family meeting this Sunday after brunch. Daniel's bringing muffins. Bethany's handling notes. We'll be going over estate matters and some summer logistics for the lake house. Let me know if you'll be joining us." No personal invite, no apology, no acknowledgement of my concerns. Just a cold, generic email like I was some business associate, not her daughter. I wrote back, "Thanks, but Ethan has a medical follow-up. We won't be attending." She didn't reply. They had the meeting. Made more decisions, took more pictures. I stopped checking social media after that. It hurt too much. But I didn't stop showing up for Ethan. I doubled down at work. Took an extra certification course in pediatric trauma. I started therapy. I joined a local single mothers group and found women who looked at me and saw me. And slowly, without them, I started rebuilding something I thought I'd lost. Not my place in their family, but my sense of worth without it. It was a Tuesday evening when Bethany showed up at my door uninvited. I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift. My scrub still smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Ethan was finishing his homework at the kitchen table, humming softly to himself. I opened the door and there she was, perfect as always, in a crisp blouse, hair glossy, smile tight. "Can we talk?" she asked. I didn't want to. Everything in me screamed to keep the door closed. But Ethan heard her voice and called out, "Aunt Bethany?" So I stepped aside. She came in and glanced around like she was appraising a rental. "Place looks cozy," she said. I didn't answer. I poured myself some water and waited. She didn't sit, just hovered. "I wanted to say this in person," she began, "because I know you've been feeling left out." I raised an eyebrow. "Feeling?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I'm not saying you are, just that you feel that way. And I think we need to clear the air before things get even more uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable for who?" "For all of us," she said. "Mom's hurt, Rachel. She feels like you've distanced yourself from the family, and it's making things difficult. Daniel's trying to keep things civil, but he says you've been cold. Did he also tell you I invited him to dinner, and he left without saying goodbye?" She waved a hand like it didn't matter. "You've just been different. Ever since Ethan got sick, it's like everything has to revolve around your trauma. We all have stuff going on, Rach." I stared at her, stunned. "Trauma? My son was in the ICU." "I know," she said. "And I'm glad he's okay, really. But you've made everyone feel guilty. It's exhausting." I swallowed hard. "I didn't ask anyone to feel guilty, I asked them to care." She softened her tone, placing a manicured hand on the counter. "Mom's changing her will because she needs stability. You're emotional. You're reactive. She doesn't feel like she can trust you with responsibilities right now." "And you think she can trust you?" Bethany smiled. "I've always been the reliable one." That word stung, reliable. Like I hadn't been showing up for Ethan every single day, sacrificing everything, holding my life together with duct tape and prayer. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to stop this rift. Come to brunch. Be present. Stop acting like a martyr." I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not acting like anything. I'm surviving." She hesitated. "Well, if you want back in, you're going to have to let some things go." That was the real message. Not love. Not reconciliation. Submission. Fall in line. Apologize for bleeding on their carpet. Pretend it never happened. She left after that. Gave Ethan a kiss on the forehead and breezed out like she'd done something noble. I stood there for a long time after the door clicked shut, feeling like I'd just been scolded for being injured in a war I never asked to fight. 2 weeks later, I was summoned. The message came from Daniel. "Family gathering. Sunday at Mom's. She wants to talk through everything once and for all. Please come." I didn't want to. But part of me still hoped stupidly that someone might finally see me. So I went. It was a sunny afternoon. The kind of day that made you feel like things should be light, not heavy. But when I walked in, the air was thick with tension. Mom sat at the head of the table, a notepad in front of her like she was chairing a meeting. Daniel and Bethany were on either side of her. Grandma sat silently in the corner, sipping tea, eyes half closed. "Rachel," my mother said coolly. "Thanks for coming. Let's start." I barely sat down before she launched in. "We need to move forward as a family. That means putting the past behind us." I folded my hands. "Are we going to talk about what happened? What you said, what you didn't do?" Bethany interjected. "This isn't about blame." "It's not," I said, voice tight. "Because it feels like I've been blamed for a lot. For being upset, for needing support, for not pretending everything's fine." Daniel leaned forward. "No one's saying you didn't go through something hard, but you act like we abandoned you." "You did." Silence. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "We're not perfect, but we've always included you." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Really? When?" "When you rewrote the will. When you had a party without us and called it the whole family. When you said Ethan's ICU stay was exaggerated." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You don't understand how difficult it is to balance everything. Bethany and Daniel have been here. They've helped. You've always been unpredictable. I stood up. My hands were shaking. You know what's unpredictable? A child going into septic shock. You know what's not? Being cut out of your own father's legacy like you never mattered. Grandma spoke then, her voice hoarse. Rachel, sit, please. But I couldn't. Something had broken. Maybe it had been cracking for years. But this was the moment it split wide open. I'm done pretending, I said quietly. If this is what family looks like, I'll pass. And I walked out. I didn't cry on the drive home. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, my jaw locked in place, and every muscle in my body buzzed like a live wire. I couldn't even play music. The silence was too loud, but noise felt like it would crack me open. I just drove, eyes fixed ahead, like I could outrun the ache building behind my ribs. When I got home, Ethan was at our neighbor's house, Mrs. Porter, a retired kindergarten teacher who had taken to Ethan like he was her own grandchild. She handed him over with a soft smile and a lunchbox full of cookies. Everything okay, sweetheart? She asked, eyes searching mine. I nodded, lied. Just tired. That night, after Ethan went to sleep, curled up beside me like he always did when I looked upset, I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling. My eyes burned, but no tears came. I kept thinking about the living room at my mother's house, the way they sat together, back straight, expressions calm, speaking like this was some corporate debriefing and not the culmination of years of silent wounds. It hadn't been a family meeting. It had been a quiet execution. One where they didn't even flinch as they pushed me out. That night turned into morning. I hadn't slept. I went to work with 2 hours of rest and a coffee that tasted like mud. I told my patients everything would be okay. I soothed crying families and held the hand of a man who died quietly with no one by his side. And when I went home, I collapsed onto the couch and cried harder than I ever had. Not loud, not wild. Just deep, shuddering sobs that came from the center of everything I'd buried. I cried for Ethan, for the years ahead where he'd grow up wondering why he only saw his family in photos and Facebook posts. I cried for myself, for the little girl inside me who had always wanted to be chosen, to be enough, to be someone worth making room for. And I cried for my father, who I knew deep in my bones would have fought for me if he were still alive. But mostly, I cried because I finally understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. No amount of effort would ever fix this. I had knocked on a door that had already been locked from the inside. The following week, I received a letter in the mail. Real paper, formal letterhead. From my mother's lawyer. Dear Miss Rachel Morgan, this correspondence is to inform you that due to recent updates to the Morgan family estate planning, the following assets have been reassigned. The lake house in Lakeview County will be jointly inherited by Daniel Morgan and Bethany Sinclair. As per millisecond. Helen Morgan's directives, you are not listed as a beneficiary in this asset transfer. All decisions are final. There was no note. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what that house meant to me. Just ink on paper, signed and notarized, reducing me to a legal nonentity. I put the letter down and sat in the kitchen for a long time. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared at the counter like it might give me answers. Then I walked to the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a small wooden box, carved by my father when I was a child. He'd made one for each of us and had a daisy carved into the lid. I kept a few letters from him in there, old Polaroids, and one seashell from a trip to the lake house when I was 11. He had taken me out on the dock just before sunset. We sat there with our feet in the water, and he told me, this place will always be yours too. Don't let anyone tell you different. I held that shell in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, the tears returned. Not from anger, from grief. I missed him. I missed the version of life where he was still around, and maybe just maybe this wouldn't have happened. I don't remember how long I sat there. At some point, Ethan woke up, walked over to me, and crawled into my lap. He didn't say a word. Just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "It's okay, Mommy." I broke all over again. The days that followed blurred together. I went through the motions at work. I smiled when I had to. I responded to Ethan's questions with half answers and practiced cheerful tones. But I was sinking. Quietly. Like someone falling through ice frozen over on the surface, screaming under the water where no one could hear. One night, I found myself driving out to the lake house without meaning to. I didn't even remember turning onto the highway. But there I was, pulling up to the gravel path, headlights shining on the house that used to feel like home. It looked the same, but colder. Smaller somehow. Bethany's SUV was in the driveway. I didn't get out. I just sat there in the car, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I watched the lights in the kitchen flicker through the blinds. I could see movement shadows, probably her kids, maybe Daniel, maybe my mother. It was a full house. And yet, I had never felt so alone. I didn't belong to them anymore. Maybe I never had. I drove back in silence, no music, no radio. Just the hum of the road and the whisper of wind slicing past my windows. I stopped trying to reach out after that. No more texts, no more invitations. I didn't send Ethan's birthday photo to Grandma. I didn't respond to Bethany's group message about Thanksgiving logistics. I deleted it the second it came in. It wasn't defiance, it wasn't bitterness. It was self-preservation. Sometimes, survival means letting go of the hand that keeps pulling you underwater. And sometimes, the loneliest choice is the most necessary one. 2 weeks after that night at the lake house, I received an email from a man named Greg Patterson. The name didn't ring a bell at first. The subject line read, "Regarding your father's estate, urgent." I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something made me pause. I opened it. "Miss Morgan, I hope this finds you well. My name is Greg Patterson. I was your father's attorney before he passed in 1998. While reviewing some archived files during our firm's recent digital conversion, I came across a series of personal letters and an earlier will your father wrote before his death. Given recent events regarding the Lakeview property, I believe this information may be of interest to you. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I read the message 3 times before the words truly registered. My heart began to race. I called the number in the signature. Greg answered on the second ring. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice calm and deliberate. "Thank you for calling. I was hoping you would." He explained that after his retirement, a backlog of physical files from the 90s had been stored in offsite archives. It was only when they began digitizing records that they rediscovered my father's personal file letters, notes, and a signed, notarized will that, for some reason, had never been filed with probate. My voice trembled. "A will?" "Yes." Dated March 1998. Roughly 3 months before his passing. "And what does it say?" I asked. "Rachel, he left the lake house to you." The words hit me like a freight train. I nearly dropped the phone. Greg continued. "He stated explicitly that the property was to be placed in a trust under your name until your 30th birthday, at which point you would receive full ownership. There are also several personal letters addressed to you and your mother, outlining his reasoning." I felt lightheaded. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? "I can't answer that," he said. "But I believe you deserve to read what your father intended. Would you be able to come by my office?" I went the next morning. Greg was an older man, white hair, kind eyes. He welcomed me into a conference room where a small brown folder sat on the table. Inside were photocopies of a handwritten will, 2 signed letters, and a legal draft that had never made it to court. He slid the letter addressed to me across the table. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and I hate that more than anything in this world. You were always my strongest, most thoughtful child. You saw things others didn't. I wanted to make sure you knew how much I saw you too. The lake house was always your place. You loved it like I did. You took care of it. You asked questions no one else asked. That's why I'm leaving it to you not out of favoritism, but because I trust you'll protect it. It's yours. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. You are more than enough. You are everything. Love, Dad. I don't know how long I sat there, reading that letter over and over again. It felt like my heart was being sewn back together word by word. For the first time in years, I felt seen. But then the heat of betrayal rose again. My mother knew. She had to have known. Greg confirmed it. The envelope with this letter was clearly addressed to your mother. It included instructions to ensure you received it after his passing. Whether it was lost or deliberately ignored, I can't say. But we can act on the will. The original will on file at probate had listed my mother as sole beneficiary. That was the one that was filed after his death. This new will, however, was more recent, more detailed, and absolutely valid if contested. Greg looked at me seriously. Rachel, I know this is a lot, but if you're ready to fight, we have a case. And frankly, you have every right. That night, I couldn't sleep. My father's letter sat beside me on the bed, weighted with the force of what it meant. All this time, I had believed the lie that I wasn't chosen, wasn't worthy. That they were right to erase me. But the truth had been sitting in a dusty file box, waiting for me to find it. And now that I had, I couldn't stay silent. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer of my own. We filed a motion to challenge the existing estate distribution. Greg assisted with providing authentication of the documents. My legal team reached out to my mother and her counsel. The response came quickly aggressive, dismissive, and cold. But I didn't back down. Bethany sent me a message, bitter and angry. What the hell is this, Rachel? Are you seriously going to drag the family through court over a house? What is wrong with you? I replied. What's wrong with me is that you all knowingly kept something from me that my father wanted me to have. This isn't just about a house, it's about respect and the truth. Daniel never responded at all. My mother, predictably, sent me a typed letter via her attorney. Miss Morgan, we believe the document you're relying on is outdated and irrelevant. Your behavior is causing distress to the rest of the family and will be handled accordingly. But I had the will. I had the date. I had my father's handwriting, and I had resolve. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging for a seat at their table. I was claiming the seat that had always been mine. We scheduled a hearing. My attorney prepared the case meticulously, attaching the will, the letters, and Greg's sworn testimony. It wasn't just about legal ownership. It was about telling the story, my story, the one they tried to erase. When I told Ethan we might be getting the lake house back, he looked up at me with wide eyes. Is it ours, Mommy? For real? I nodded. Yes, baby. It always was. The court date arrived on a Wednesday morning that felt heavier than usual. The sky was overcast, gray and moody, the kind of weather that presses on your chest like a silent warning. I wore black slacks, a soft blue blouse, and tied my hair back into a simple bun. I didn't want to look too formal or too fragile, just focused. Ethan stayed home with Mrs. Porter, unaware of the weight of what was about to happen. When I walked into the courthouse, my heart was hammering. My attorney, Melissa, met me at the security line. She was a petite woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could slice through concrete. They're already here, she whispered, handing me a folder. Stay calm, let the truth do the talking. Inside the courtroom, my mother sat on the opposite bench, perfectly composed in her beige suit, pearls tight around her neck. Beside her, Bethany scrolled through her phone, barely looking up. Daniel sat with arms folded, expression unreadable. They looked like a united front. I was alone, but not afraid. Not anymore. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Melissa stood and introduced the case, outlining the timeline, presenting my father's letter, the notarized will, the testimony of Greg Patterson. She moved with precision, each point slicing through the silence like a scalpel. The other attorney, a sharp-jawed man named Brent, objected, questioned the authenticity, accused us of misinterpreting a non-binding document. Melissa shut him down with clarity and confidence. Then it was time for witness testimony. Greg Patterson took the stand first. He spoke slowly, clearly, detailing his relationship with my father, their meetings, the original drafting of the will, and his discovery of the letters. "I kept all documents as per firm policy," Greg said. "It is my professional opinion and obligation to state that Mr. Morgan's final intentions were clearly written and legally valid at the time they were signed." Brent tried to shake him. "Isn't it possible, Mr. Morgan changed his mind before his passing?" Greg didn't blink. If he had, he would have returned to the firm. He didn't. Next, the judge called me up. As I took the stand, I steadied my breath. My palms were sweating. Melissa nodded at me from her seat, silent encouragement in her eyes. "Miss Morgan," the judge began, "in your own words, tell us why you're contesting the estate." I looked directly at him. "Because my father left me the lake house. Because he trusted me with it. Because that property was the only thing he had to leave, and I believe it was stolen from me by people who never intended to honor his wishes." The judge tilted his head. "And when did you discover this?" 3 weeks ago. Through Mr. Patterson. I had no idea the will existed until he contacted me. Had your family ever told you otherwise? I glanced at my mother. She stared back, blank as stone. "No," I said. "They told me the house belonged to my siblings. I was never consulted, never informed, and when I asked, I was told I wasn't in a position to maintain property and that I was unreliable." Brent stood. "Objection. Irrelevant personal interpretation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. Continue." I swallowed. "My father died when I was 9. Before that, he and I were close. He taught me to swim at the lake house. We'd fish off the dock every summer. He told me once that he hoped I'd live there someday. And now, I have evidence that he put that into writing. I'm not fighting for money or revenge. I just want what he intended for me." Brent grilled me afterward, trying to undermine my credibility, insinuating I only stepped forward now because of financial motivation. I stared him down. "My father didn't write that letter because I needed money," I said. "He wrote it because he saw me. That's more than anyone else in this room has done for 20 years. He didn't respond. After I stepped down, the judge allowed my mother to testify. She walked up slowly, like the air was thinner for her. She sat and folded her hands in her lap, looking every bit the grieving widow and composed matriarch. "Mrs. Morgan," the judge began, "did you ever see the will or letter that your daughter has presented?" There was a pause. A beat too long. Then she said, "No, Your Honor, I never saw that document until recently." It was a lie. I could feel it. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched slightly, in how she avoided my eyes. "And if it were true that your late husband intended the lake property for your daughter, why do you think she was excluded?" She took a soft breath. "Rachel's always been sensitive, emotional. After he passed, I did what I thought was best for everyone. She was still a child. I made the decisions that I believed would keep the family stable." "Oh, but at the cost of your husband's final wishes?" She hesitated. "I don't remember receiving any letter. If I did, it must have been lost. Misplaced. I never intended to harm her." Bethany was called next. She was flippant, defensive. "She didn't even ask about the house for years," she said. "Suddenly, she wants it, feels like a cash grab." Melissa stood. "Miss Sinclair, did your mother ever tell you that the house was intended for Rachel?" Bethany shifted. Not in those words." "Then, but you were aware that the property had emotional meaning for her." "She's always emotional." Bethany snapped. "We didn't think she could handle it. She had a baby alone. She works odd hours. We figured she wasn't interested." "So you decided for her?" Bethany folded her arms. "We did what made sense. Daniel didn't testify, he declined. Just sat there staring at the floor like he wished he were anywhere else." The judge recessed to review the documents. The room emptied slowly, but I remained seated. My mother walked past without looking at me. Bethany glared. Daniel hesitated, then walked up to me. I didn't know about the letter, he said. But I knew she was hiding something. I should have said something. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Not with words, I just nodded once, and he walked away. When we reconvened, the judge returned with a stack of papers in his hand. I've reviewed the evidence and find no reason to dispute the authenticity of Mr. Morgan's updated will. Legally, it is binding and supersedes the prior documentation filed. Therefore, the Lakeview property is to be transferred into Miss Rachel Morgan's name effective immediately. I exhaled. The breath I'd been holding for years finally released. Melissa smiled and squeezed my arm. The courtroom buzzed with silence. My mother didn't stand. Bethany stared ahead, stunned. I didn't wait for them to react. I left the courtroom, walked outside into the dull light, and let the first gust of clean air fill my lungs like forgiveness. But this wasn't about winning. This was about being heard. This was about telling the truth and having it matter. I didn't celebrate that night. There was no champagne, no victory party. Just Ethan and me, eating grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen table like we always did on long, exhausting days. He didn't know the specifics. I hadn't told him much beyond. Mommy had to talk to some important people about a house Grandpa wanted us to have. That was enough for him. Does that mean we can go to the lake now? He asked, his eyes wide with hope. Soon, I said. Very soon. He smiled and reached for another bite, and that was it, that quiet, honest moment between mother and son. That was what I had fought for. Not a piece of property. Not revenge. Just a space to build something new, something untouched by shame, manipulation, or silence. Word spread quickly. Within a week, I received emails from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. A cousin congratulated me with thinly veiled curiosity. An aunt sent a message that said, "Proud of you, but I hope this doesn't divide the family too much." I didn't respond to either. I wasn't interested in opinions. I was interested in peace. But I knew my mother wouldn't stay quiet for long. It came in the form of a voicemail. 2 minutes and 18 seconds of quiet venom disguised as grief. Rachel. Well, I hope you're happy. You embarrassed me in front of the entire family. You've caused a rift that will take years to mend. I still can't believe you did this over a house. Over something your father never even told me about directly. You've made yourself the victim again, and as usual, everyone's buying it. I suppose you've won. I hope it was worth it. I didn't call back. I played the message twice, then deleted it. Her silence after the court decision had been louder than any words. And now, her voice, her carefully crafted guilt, felt smaller than it ever had. She didn't care about the house, she cared about control, and she had lost it. 3 weeks later, I drove to the lake house alone. I needed to see it, to feel it again, before I brought Ethan. I parked at the top of the gravel path and stood outside the car for a long time, just looking. The porch swing my dad built still hung in place. The shutters were chipped and weather-worn. The dock looked a little more fragile, but it was all still there. Waiting. Inside, it smelled like dust and summer. I opened windows. Let the breeze in. Walked the rooms barefoot like I had as a child. My father's handwriting was still on a pencil-marked growth chart on the pantry wall. My name was the last one he had etched, just weeks before he died. I sat on the living room floor, legs crossed, back against the couch, and cried, not with grief this time, but with release. For the first time in years, I felt grounded. Not floating. Not fighting. Just still. A few days later, I brought Ethan. He ran down the path like he'd been there 100 times before. The lake shimmered, calm and quiet, and he screamed with laughter as he raced toward the dock. I followed behind slowly, watching his joy, and felt something bloom in my chest that I hadn't felt in so long. Hope. That weekend, we painted the porch swing together. He picked blue. Like the sky, he said. We planted wildflowers in the garden bed. We cleaned out the shed and found an old radio my dad used to play during fishing trips. When I turned it on and heard the crackle of static and then a soft jazz tune, it felt like a whisper from him. Like he was saying, "You made it, kid." Bethany showed up 3 weeks later. I wasn't surprised. I saw her car at the end of the road. She got out, stood at the edge of the driveway, and waited. I didn't go to her right away. I let her wait. When I finally walked over, she looked at me with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. "You're really going to keep it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It's mine." "It was ours," she snapped. "No," I said calmly. "It never was. It was always mine. You just didn't want to believe that someone like me could be chosen over someone like you." Her mouth tightened. "Mom's devastated." "I'm sure she is," I said. "But she brought it on herself." Bethany looked at the house, the porch, the garden. "You're going to live here?" "Not yet. Maybe someday. Right now, it's just peace." She nodded slowly. "You know she'll never forgive you." "I'm not asking her to." There was a long silence between us. Finally, she said, "I guess I never realized how much it meant to you." "That's the problem," I said. "None of you ever asked." She didn't argue. Just turned, got back in her car, and left. It was the last time we spoke. 2 months passed. Ethan and I spent weekends at the lake, slow and simple. We painted walls, fixed doors, hung drawings on the fridge. I kept my job at the hospital, picked up a few weekend shifts, but I moved with more intention. I didn't answer every call. I didn't force smiles at family gatherings. I stopped reaching for people who never reached back. My mother sent one letter in late spring. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a single paragraph about reassessing family dynamics and her intention to maintain grace. I didn't reply. I folded it, put it in the back of the box with my father's letter, and closed the lid. One morning, I sat on the dock with Ethan beside me, our feet dangling in the water. The sun was warm on our faces. He leaned his head against my arm and said, "I like it here, it's quiet." I kissed the top of his head. "Me too." For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for anyone's permission to exist. I wasn't chasing their approval. I had stood up in a room full of people who spent years making me feel small, and I had told the truth. And the truth had set me free. The summer that followed was the first time I ever truly exhaled. Not the shallow kind of breath I had grown used to, tight and cautious, like waiting for the next blow, but the deep, steady sort that fills your lungs and tells your nervous system it's finally safe. The lake house became our weekend sanctuary. Friday evenings, I'd pick Ethan up from school, and we'd drive the winding roads as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in burnt orange and soft lavender. By the time we reached the house, the crickets would be chirping, and the air would smell like pine, water, and something ancient and comforting. I repainted the kitchen cabinets, fixed the back steps, and turned the attic into a little reading nook for Ethan, complete with bean bags, fairy lights, and a small bookshelf full of his favorites. He took to the house as if it had been waiting for him all along, as though the walls remembered my childhood laughter and welcomed his with equal warmth. The old place needed work, yes. But it had soul. It had history. It had love layered deep in the floorboards. And now, it had us. Back in the city, things were quieter in a different way. The text threads that used to buzz with family logistics went silent. I wasn't included in planning calls or birthday groups. Bethany had unfriended me on every social platform, and Daniel only sent a few one-line emails here and there about Grandma's health or some logistical update. My mother didn't reach out again after the letter. I hadn't expected her to. What I hadn't expected, though, was how peaceful that silence would feel. No more managing her moods. No more translating passive aggression or reading between the lines of family politics. No more twisting myself into shapes for people who had only ever seen me as a cautionary tale. Instead, I turned my attention to people who saw me differently. Mrs. Porter started coming to the lake house once a month, just for a day trip. She'd bring Ethan little books and puzzles and help me with the garden. She was in her late 70s, but still spry, always humming and giving me small wisdoms between sips of iced tea. One afternoon, as we sat watching Ethan chase dragonflies near the dock, she said, "You know, Some people are only put in your life to show you exactly who you don't want to become. And that's still a gift. I thought about that for a long time. I thought about my mother, about all the birthdays she organized, the photos she curated, the image she polished until it gleamed. She wanted a family that looked good on paper, not one that felt real behind closed doors. She wanted obedience, not connection. She wanted to win arguments, not resolve them. She lost me the moment she told me to leave my son in the ICU and come to a party. And as hard as that is to admit, it's also the truth. Sometimes you don't lose people, you free yourself from them. In the fall, I was offered a position closer to the lake. A smaller hospital, but solid pay and better hours. I took it. We moved permanently into the lake house in October. I found a local daycare for Ethan and enrolled him in the elementary school just 2 towns over. He adjusted quickly, making friends, joining art club, even starting to learn how to fish the way his grandpa once taught me. We started new traditions. Saturday pancake mornings with whipped cream and berries. Evening walks down the trail behind the house. Stargazing on the dock, wrapped in blankets, counting constellations. It was the kind of life I'd always dreamed of, simple, honest, warm. And not unseated, I missed the cold, clipped conversations of my past life. There was a time when I thought family meant loyalty no matter what. That it meant showing up even when you're hurt, staying quiet to keep peace, forgiving before an apology ever comes. But I know better now. Family is who shows up when it matters. Who listens without defending themselves. Who sees your pain and doesn't look away. And sometimes, family is a neighbor who brings soup when your son's sick, or a coworker who takes your shift when you're too tired to stand, or a child who kisses your cheek and says, "You're the best mommy ever," without knowing how many nights you cried behind a bathroom door just to make it to morning. One day, out of nowhere, I received a letter from Grandma. Not a long one. Just a single page in shaky cursive. "Dear Rachel, I'm sorry. I should have said something a long time ago. I knew about the letter. Your mother showed it to me. I told her to give it to you, but she never did. I didn't push. I should have pushed. You deserved better. Your father would be proud of you. Love, Grandma." I sat on the porch for a long time with that letter in my lap. The air smelled like fallen leaves and the last traces of summer. I felt something close that I hadn't even realized was still open. I never wrote back. Not because I was angry, but because sometimes peace means letting the apology be the period at the end of a chapter. Not a comma. Ethan and I built a new life in that house. Over time, the lake became ours. The silence no longer echoed with what had been lost, it rang with what we had built. When I looked at Ethan, I didn't see a child burdened by a fractured family. I saw a boy who felt loved, who was safe, who belonged to a life not built on guilt but on truth. And that was enough. More than enough. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be living in the house my father built, surrounded by peace instead of tension, joy instead of guilty, wouldn't have believed them. Back then, I still clung to the idea that if I tried hard enough, if I showed up enough, if I swallowed my pain and smiled through it, I'd earn my place at the table. I thought that was love. I thought that was family. But now I know better. Now I know that some families run on conditions. They love you when you're useful, when you're quiet, when you play the role they wrote for you, and when you stop, when you speak, when you stand, when you say enough. They turn, they blame, they shame, they freeze you out. But silence isn't peace, and shrinking yourself isn't love. It took almost losing everything to realize I was worth more than the scraps of approval I'd been trained to beg for. It took 5 days in an ICU, a courtroom battle, and a letter from a dead man to remind me that I had never been invisible, I'd just been ignored. And I won't be ignored anymore. Ethan is growing up in a world where he doesn't have to perform to be loved. He knows he's valued not for what he does, but for who he is. And watching him flourish in that freedom has healed parts of me I didn't know were still broken. Every time he laughs without looking over his shoulder, Every time he draws a picture and shouts, "Look what I made," without fear of being dismissed, I see the little girl I used to be. And I promise her, silently, that it will be different now. Because I made it different. I fought for that difference. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Choosing yourself when you've been conditioned to choose everyone else first, it feels like betrayal at first. It feels selfish. It feels wrong. But it isn't. It's the bravest thing you can do. Saying, "I matter," in a room full of people who've always treated you like you don't, that takes strength most people will never understand. So, if you're reading this, if you've ever been the black sheep, the scapegoat, the invisible one, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. You are not hard to love. You are not overreacting. You are waking up. And waking up is painful. But it is also powerful. You will lose people. You will grieve the version of your family you hoped existed. You will question everything. But on the other side of that grief is something so much greater. Clarity, freedom, self-respect, and peace, the real kind. Not the peace that comes from keeping the peace, but the kind that comes from no longer needing to. I still have hard days. There are moments, even now, when I see a picture of Bethany's children and wonder if Ethan will grow up resenting the distance. When I hear of a family gathering I wasn't invited to, and it stings more than I like to admit. But then Ethan wraps his arms around me and says, "I love you, Mommy," and I remember I didn't lose a family. I saved one. Mine. We may be small, just the two of us, but our love is loud. Our home is warm, our life is real. And that's enough. My father saw me. He saw who I was and who I could be. His words in that letter, his belief in me, are something I carry like armor. They remind me that even in silence, even in absence, love can leave a mark strong enough to shatter lies. He believed in me. And now I finally believe in me too. So this is my story. Not the neat version. Not the one that makes people comfortable. But the real one. The one where a woman stands up and says, "This hurt me, this happened, and I'm still standing." If you've been waiting for permission to walk away from the people who don't see you, this is it. If you've been waiting to choose yourself, do it. And if no one's ever told you this before, let me be the first. You don't have to earn love. You already deserve it.